Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. I am Christopher Mader, owner and creator of the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Conservative Media Network, and we are here at the studio at my home here in Worcester, Mass, and once again proving always that we are nationwide, calling in for his third, fourth, fifth time. After three times, I lose count because this is a great guest. It's always a great guest. Served under four presidents and rains down death and destruction on the godless communists. I'll always remember that line from our first interview. It was great. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show, Colonel Reid Reasor from Texas. Colonel, welcome to the show again.
Thanks, Christopher. Thanks for the words. I want to say I've been following your posts on Facebook and listening to what you're posting and where you're at. I think you got a good beat on what's happening in our country and how far we've moved away from lawful conduct in the Constitution. So I enjoy following, so thank you.
And in the interview that I sent you, the outline and stuff, we're going to explore that a little bit more because I call it, I've coined the phrase, the acceleration of the tyranny. And it seems like things are happening faster and faster now. And I mentioned in the outline, and we'll get to it, that, I mean, the liberals, they're the closest they're probably ever going to get in history of a complete takeover, but we'll get to that. And thank you for that. What I want to start off with is, obviously, Clive and Bundy and Bundyville. And to a certain degree, it's almost become old news now. The situation hasn't completely resolved, but I mean, no sooner is this situation leveling out, but we learned that there's a similar attempt in your state of Texas along the Red River area, and I have some stuff here I want to look at. Texas officials are raising alarms that the Bureau of Land Management, on the heels of its dust-up with Nevada rancher Clive and Bundy, might be eyeing a massive land grab in northern Texas. And again, it's a long under-the-radar issue. It's caught the attention of the Texas Attorney General, Greg Abbott. He fired off a letter and to BLM Director Neil Korn, saying the agency appears to be threatening the private property rights of hardworking Texans. And here we go again, Colonel. And what do you know? It's almost right in your backyard. What do you know about this? Tell us about it.
Well, in Texas specifically, it's an aggressive agenda to decrease the ability of ranchers to be successful. There's nothing more you can say about it. It is truly a guise of Agenda 21, where the left, the folks there believe that the land is underutilized by ranching, and they know better in D.C. on what to do with the land. So if you're a rancher, or if you're trying to be prosperous with new technology to bring oil and natural gas out of old wells by using hydraulic fracturing, which is a recyclable effort. I mean, you fracture, you get oil, and you bring all that water back up and recycle it. But the specific thing in the Red River is that is probably one of the more prosperous areas for beef and cattle ranching. And since the left hates that, they're really trying to make it so that you cannot be successful on your own. And there's two agencies that work together here in collusion: the BLM and the EPA. And the scam here is that the EPA continues to expand borders of their endangered species and then hand it back over to the BLM and say, you need to manage the land because these people can't.
Wow.
I think Abbott has fought the EPA many times. And we know the whole story about what happened down here with the EPA denying every permit for us to drill.
Sure, right.
So we have to sue them every time. So it is a war against prosperity, both in the new technologies as well as in our ranching. And they really do want to try and get us out of being self-sufficient and dependent on the electric grid, dependent on their food grid, dependent on their water and sewer, instead of being able to take care of ourselves. And it's a terrible thing. People are walking away from their seventh generation ranches going, I can't deal, I can't fight these folks. And it's disgusting what's happening in Texas. It really is a terrible thing.
Now, let's explore a little bit, and I got this off of Wikipedia, what the Bureau of Land Management is. And I don't really like using Wikipedia. It tends to be a skewed source of information. The only reason why I use it is it gives me a foundation to go by, and because I'm intelligent, I can read what's in front of me and think outside the box and then explore the actual truth. But let me just read a little bit here. Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, is an agency within the United States Department of the Interior that administers America's public lands, totaling 247 million acres, plus or minus 1/8 of the land mass of the country. It's actually kind of small. However, when you break it up into the states, and you look at the amount of states, I think it's something like in Utah, something like 65% of Utah land is owned by the federal government, and I know the governor of Utah is up in arms about that. There's a huge push in Utah to try to overthrow all of that and put power back into control of the people. Do you have an idea? I don't have the numbers in front of me for Texas. Do you have an idea of what it's like in Texas? I mean, and it's so strange to hear that Texas would. I mean, I always see Texas as a staunch independent state, but go ahead.
Well, I think if you look at the East Coast, when our country was expanding west for Louisiana Purchase, there came a point where everything was private property. And if you look like Illinois, it's all, personal, private property, very little federal property, like or state property. And so when they're moving west, they got concerned about it, and then conservationists said we need to set aside more land. So the western states, Colorado is 72% owned by the federal government.
Yeah.
If you look at Nevada, specifically Bundy, most of the land right north of Vegas is a military complex. That's where Nellis is and the Red Spike Ranges, as well as certain restricted areas embedded in there. So it's a huge land mass, and the only private stuff is along the roads and the freeways. So land that isn't developable is mostly federal government. So land that is developable is very precious because you can't develop right close to the freeways. So you got a very narrow margin where the freeways go that have private land. Now, Texas is one of the states that has very few places that are public land. Mostly Texas is privately owned. But there's a big push to grab land back that the federal government gets to manage. And they're doing it. They're doing it out of the plains. They're doing it in the north area by the Red River, and they're trying to do it down on the south borders, mainly saying that you ranchers can't have access to the river, to the Rio, even though your family's been there for 7 generations because we need it for border control, even though they're not controlling the borders. So it's just ridiculous. The policy is punitive toward conservative states. And even though Nevada isn't a conservative state, but what happened with Harry Reid there is disgusting. It really is.
The guy is he's behind the whole thing. I mean, I'm almost wondering if there are mob ties with this guy. Well, we all know that the guy is mentally unstable. I think there's some mob ties. We all know about his, his son or his brother that's involved in the solar deal, which is part of the whole conundrum behind the Bundy situation. I guess some of the land surrounding Bundy's ranch is land that Harry Reid and his family wants to develop for their solar farm with a Chinese company. And even though this is being reported, it's not really being paid much attention to. I love the way the media is now switching the narrative. First it was the desert tortoise, which we all know was BS. And now that the thing is kind of somewhat settled out a little bit, and they've lost the fight and lost the argument, it's turned into, and you've seen it, the New York Times horribly edited and cut up video interview of Bundy, and they make him sound like a racist. And I have a copy of the original clip. It's nothing like that of the sort. Does the guy use poorly chosen words? Possibly. But as I was saying to a friend of mine who asked me about that, and I said to him, look, he's an old guy. He comes from a different time, a different generation. He's from a different part of the country, and you can't really interpose our 21st century, our 2014 mentality of racism and political correctness upon a guy who's basically worked his whole life and lived his whole life independently. You can't do that. So when I see the way the media is skewing the whole thing, this is part of them controlling the message, isn't it?
It most certainly is, and media working in collusion with the government and with Harry Reid to control the narrative. The part that we have to really understand is the Bureau of Land Management does not have a warrant. And what I mean by a warrant is you get sworn in as a law enforcement officer responsible to a particular judge or magistrate or county judge or federal judge, of which the judge looks at you and goes, you have arrest authority under the jurisdiction of my court.
Sure.
The Bureau of Land Management does not have the ability to arrest anybody. They have no warrant under the federal government. They are a land management group. They are also illegal to use force. So if they show up with a gun, that's an illegal gun. They can't use force. They have to, if they believe force is required, they have to go to the local constable or go to the local commissioner or go to the state and go, I require state police for this action. To show up armed as a federal force is illegal, and every one of those people should have been arrested.
Because everybody who was there, you've seen all the videos. I've poured over dozens of them. The vehicles that they use in National Park Service, and some of them came as far as Oregon and Montana. It's like, what are Park Service people from Oregon and Montana driving all the way to Nevada? It's ridiculous. So I never knew that the actual imposition of a federal force is an illegal act, because that was going to be one of my other side questions is where was the state on this? Where was if this guy had broken the law and he had to be arrested, why weren't the state police there? Why weren't the local constables there? Go ahead.
Maybe we should ask Senator Harry Reid why the state did not respond, why the state did not go and arrest these illegal EPA use of force, why the governor did not forcibly go down there and tear down that First Amendment restriction facility zone and go, you are making an illegal act in my state. So I believe truly that Harry Reid is linked into influencing the state. So, what is a federal representative doing, manipulating the land deals in his own state? That to me just screams of crime.
Of course it does.
And it is Harry Reid's son. Now, on the solar power thing, I have to be really clear.
Go ahead.
Those of us who are engineers, solar power is a pure gimmick. It only collects 2% of the arriving power that strikes a little cell. The only reason they're building these things is because we, the taxpayer, are paying for it. Solar power costs 10 times as much as a regular carbon plant, or a nuclear plant, or a hydro plant. Germany has completely abandoned their green initiatives.
They have.
It is truly a scam, and they know that it costs more per kilowatt hour that comes out of solar power. They know it, but if they can make money by defrauding the federal government to buy bad technology, to take over the land, which is going to be more useful, what a win-win-win for them. Sure. It truly is disgusting. And
it is also it's a euphemistic bridge to nowhere. You can build all the solar farms you want, get the billions of dollars in tax subsidies and backups, and hire the contractors, own the land, lease the land to whoever. But it's a bridge to nowhere because one key element is not in place. In fact, there's a wind farm. I think it's on the western border of Nevada. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was governor, praised this and talked about it, and then later on he actually had to retract it because even though this wind farm had been built, not only the EPA but various environmental groups filed all sorts of court injunctions to halt the construction of the transmission lines. It's all well and good to put up all these wonderful green farms and wind farms. Without the transmission lines, it's a bridge to nowhere. It's just a giant park filled with mirrors. That's all it is. It's unbelievable.
I want to address the statement that putting up these greens are all well and good. If you were to power America with solar power, just the current technology solar cells, you would have to plow under California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Colorado. That's how much surface area you would need. All of those states plowed under completely to meet our energy needs. They just aren't ready. So if we were going to invest in solar technology, we should invest in research and development. Putting something, you're fielding you're fielding A model Fords on the freeway. It just isn't. It's wrong technology. It's not ready. to say it's ready. What they're really trying to do is to put something in place for a huge amount of expense, and then go shut down what's working that actually can produce electricity, and could just put us in a bind so that we will be without the ability of our infrastructure. It really is wealth destruction.
When I
It's a terrible thing.
When I spoke to the John Birch Society, I did an hour-long talk on solar and wind power last October. One of the pieces of information I discovered in my research was that everything that you said is absolutely correct. But one of the big, stark, key elements that stood out there is that these things are not powerful enough to generate large metropolis areas. They're not even strong enough to power a large city hospital with all its huge electrical demands. It certainly can't power an automotive plant or even a steel smelting plant or any type of large manufacturing plant. And what I had said in my talk is, look, I don't want to completely abandon the whole thing. If you want to put it on your house, that's your house, that's your business. You want to put it on your business, that's your business. That's your money, you invest in it, go ahead. Will it offset your costs? Of course it will, a little here, a little there. But this large scale, this massive influx, it's like you just said, you'd have to pave over, pretty much the entire West Coast just to get a fraction of it. And the wind power, and from my research, the wind power, you said Germany abandoned it. That's absolutely true. And other European countries are following suit also, because you're only getting anywhere from 16 to 24% out of a wind tower. And the wind tower actually has to go off the grid in order to start up and to actually slow down, to break, and then be shut off, and that's through the grid system. So you're right, the entire thing is a lark. Again, you want it on your house? Go for it. It's your house, it's your money, you do whatever you want. But let's move on here. Let's move on. But since its inception, 1946, the BLM manages what is termed as public land, and generally one would assume that this means our park system, wildlife refuges, national forests. And you had talked about some of the land holdings that are quite literally along the sides of roads and private property. And I remember under Reagan, Department of Interior Secretary James Watt, he wanted to open up more land to mining and drilling, timber harvesting. And of course the left went bonkers over this. But of course we hear nothing from the left about the seizure of the private lands for what we just talked about, huge solar farms, even for fracking. And let me read a little bit that I found through the internet here. 1977, James Watt became the first president and chief legal officer of the Mountain States Legal Foundation. And this is a public interest law firm. And I quote, dedicated to individual liberty, the right to own and use property, limited and ethical government, and economic freedom. So at least Watt was at least trying to focus on already owned public land when he became Secretary of the Interior. Unlike our esteemed Harry Reid, of course he wants it. But is this a fundamental shift in the policy of using resources that are already put aside, aka our national forests, our national parks, land that's already owned, that goes back all the way to Roosevelt, or is this a shift to just go ahead and seize people's private land? Go on with that.
Well, I think that first let's distinguish between there is a difference between the BLM and the national parks. The National Parks and the Forest Service is under the Forest Service, and then the BLM has a separate chunk of land. Like Colorado, there's certain areas that are BLM land and there's certain areas that are forest. In the forest, those are normally not mined, but on occasion you can get timber out when timber falls, and certain areas are harvestable. It's good to harvest. The BLM is supposed to be the one for the actual ability to have economic prosperity. But those are two different entities. Now, how the BLM is working in the battle, this is how they and the EPA work their scam. The BLM says, and what they've done to the ranchers there is they've destroyed their ability to sustain themselves. And how they do it is the BLM gives you a cow day, and they charge you for, you can have 1,000 cow days. So if you take 10 cows, you can have them out there for 100 days. If you have 100 cows, you can have them out there for 10 days. So you have a cow days. So the more cows you have, the less time you can graze. It limits how big you can be. So they have that automatically makes the ranchers constrained. Then they constrain where the rancher can go, what type of cow it can be, and what areas it is. So the days have been coming down, your cow days have been coming down, the size of UTM graves has been decreased, and the type of cattle has been decreased, to the point that almost every rancher around the Bundy area is just sold out. Now, that was on purpose, and then at the same time that they're constraining their ability to be successful, these wildly insane land offers come out, probably 2 to 3 times the value of what the rancher would think the land is worth. Most of the land ranchers sold out and sold the cattle off. Bundy said, I'm not going to do it. And Bundy came back and said, look, my 7th generation family has these rights in perpetuity, forever. So, like if you buy land in Colorado, it goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, the water rights are listed right there. And so Bundy has a piece of paper that says, look, I have access, this is before the Bureau of Land Management came into being. He said, look, I have access to this land in perpetuity. That means I can go here and graze anytime I want. This is what I purchased. Now, they came back and said, well how they got around that was the BLM went to the EPA and said, why don't you just redraw the lines of this turtle?
Jesus.
And so what they did is they pushed the tortoise's area into Bundy's grazing area. They pushed it to Bundy where he can't function.
They changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Exactly. So I'm sure Harry Reid had an access to the EPA and said, why don't you, and they even listed Bundy's ranch by name in some of the state legislation. We need to get rid of Bundy's, and so the EPA pushed the turtle into Bundy's grazing area. Bundy's like, I can't function, and I have this sheet that says I have this in perpetuity. So sorry, I'm going to graze there. And I'm not going to pay ridiculous fees because you fees and everything are trying to get me off this land, and you got this guy out from the $2.2 million to lead. I think that's nuts. He knew something was up, and it's blocking the whole access to the project. That's when Reid probably had the president order the BLM to go enforce. Now, the BLM doesn't have snipers. They don't have armed guns. They had to hire those people. Those are mercenaries that put a patch on. And those are guys that are ex-military people running around and saying, well, you go be a strong arm for me. And it's illegal. It's just ridiculously illegal. Now, when we talk about tyranny and the loss of our rights, this is what's happening. The Bureau of Land Management has no authority to do anything they're doing in Texas or anywhere else. It's ridiculous. And the EPA is in collusion with them. The Bureau of Land Management is supposed to be helping people succeed.
Mm. So who's going to be responsible? Who's going to be responsible for the cattle that were killed? And where are the indictments? Do you think they're going to come down? Do you think ICE is going to take this over? Or is it just going to turn into another IRS/Benghazi thing where the investigations stall for a year, they go on for a year and a half or 2 years, by this time Obama's out of office. And then it just, because this is the other thing too, I mean, Nixon, and you and I talked about this, and I've done it with other guests, I mean, Nixon got impeached over 18 minutes of missing tape, for crying out loud. This is actual criminal activity right in front of our faces, and it's just crickets. That's all we're hearing from this. Go on.
Well, as we talked earlier, what we've got truly 1980s style godless communist info, that we would think the Soviet Union was the evil empire. I've got my propaganda, I've got my government control, I'm shutting down private free speech, I'm punishing people for wearing a mask and a clown mask. It's 1980s godless communism with 1960s radicalism and racial hatred combined with Chicago thuggery.
Right.
So, when I talk to congressmen, and I go to Lamar Smith, my congressman in District 12, I go, why aren't you out for impeachment against Lerner or Sebelius or Sotomayor or Keegan for that matter? These people right out said, I don't like the Constitution. You should just impeach that person. That's all impeachment is removal from office. And the House can impeach any federal employee. The fact they do not impeach anybody, they have been threatened. And I knew I'd talk about the type of threat. It's a personal threat. And so what I think's happened here is I think Holder is probably involved in this as well. To even allow an armed, fully automatic weapon to show up in the hands of Bureau of Land Management.
Yeah.
The Attorney General should have been right there and arrested every single one of those BLM people.
That's
It's right in the BLM regulations. You may not use force.
That's unbelievable. This brings me to what I had said earlier. I mean, the left is the closest they've ever been in history to a complete usurpation of power and the destruction of our freedoms. But I think after what you just said, they're already here. It's already here, isn't it?
It is. And what it is, and I believe, and this is something that's going to be tough for people to digest, if you look at the historical tools to turn a country into communism, you have to destabilize it and you have to have violence.
Yeah.
Then communism prevailed. That's the way Mao did it. That's the way the Bolshevik Revolution was. That's the way it happened in Vietnam. That's what happened in Korea. If you'd like to do communism, you have to destabilize and have violence. And then promise stability and safety as you control. The tools for destabilizing us are here. Debt, currency collapse, government malfeasance is one of the big things. The government has to be seen as inept. Now, it has to be an inconsistent and inappropriate use of force. That's historical. I think they wanted a firefight. I think they want this to open up in place. You know, when you hear Cher say, hey, this guy's a racist, why don't you just kill him? And you hear Clooney come out and go, these guys are nuts, we should just kill them. When you hear people say stuff like that, they mean it. And it's not just a joke, like, oh, just kill them. No, they mean it. They really mean they want the federal government to kill us. And that's amazing to me, because I think people, you know, you talk to people on Facebook and, you know, they say, oh, you're all online, they're fighting. They go, you don't understand. I'm not going to fight the military. I'm going to fight you.
Right.
If it comes down to shooting, you always have to understand your enemy. And you have to understand the enemy of this theology that's driving our country as communism. So if it does break down into civil war, you know, what really wants to do is have the military fight the right, and they'll sit back and cheer. Because the military is mostly conservative, 72% vote for McCain. Sure. And we are the ones that are saying, hey, you're violating the law. And I'm saying, I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to go fight you guys that are destroying, usurping my country.
And one of the things I had said in one of my blog pieces, and that's funny that you said that, I practically said the same thing, in that, you know, if, God forbid, it does come to a shooting war, there is going to be a schism in our military. I think the majority of it is going to back up the American people, but the problem is we won't just be, quote unquote, fighting federalized agencies like the USDA, the BLM, because all of these agencies now have tactical vehicles and militarized weapons now. We won't just be shooting at them and them shooting at us. I think there's going to be a large contingent of American citizens who absolutely love this. They think it's wonderful, and they do. They see us as domestic terrorists. And this brings me into my next part about how the left is controlling the message. What does this mean for any future resistance movement? Let's jump in a time machine and say, okay, let's say a year from now, there's another standoff like this, or let's just look at the Texas thing that we just talked about. Let's say there's another standoff. Is the media going to turn around and start labeling, well, more domestic terrorism arises on the Red River in Texas? Kind of like the same thing they do with us at the Tea Party. Oh, you white racist teabaggers, you know, well, here we go. There's those dang ranchers again, those domestic terrorists. Here they go again on tonight's evening news. Is that a possibility?
I think you and I know the answer right away. ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, they're all controlled by 6 people. Yeah. Those 6 people all are in collusion. I mean, if you open up the tabs, and you open up your web page, each one, they all say the same thing. They all use the same pictures. Even their stories are written the same way by different people, so they're told what to report. But you know and I know anything that happens that the right does to resist the federal government, we will be racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted, backwards, redneck, stupid Texans. You know, and you tell someone, hey, well, I'm a 15th Squadron Commander, and I have a, bachelor's in astrophysics and master's in technology, and I'm working on my doctorate, and I'm an instructor in the world's top technology. So, no, you're actually Texas. You can't break the narrative. It's what they really think. People in Massachusetts and in Boston really think Texans are just stupid.
California.
And we're left that. And this is the historic slave thinking is that I'm smarter than you, Christopher. In fact, I'm smarter than you. I know better than you. In fact, I know better so much I'm so right. I'm justified in taking away your human rights and even killing you for the greater good. That's how the left believes. That's what they think. They really think we're stupid. And we need to be put down like a rabid dog. Now, that, I believe, personally, is what Holder and Obama want to achieve before 2016. I believe it. I believe they want to destabilize us and print money faster than they can and devalue the dollar. They say inflation is 1.5%. I go, I just went shopping for groceries. I don't think so. You know, well, inflation, price of food went up 20% in the last 4 months.
Sure, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
So there's really nothing that the left says that I trust.
It's hitting us hard. It's hitting us hard here in Massachusetts. We're fighting the automatic gas tax with our wonderful legislatures. Oh, they're so forward-thinking. They figured out a way to permanently raise the gasoline tax here in Massachusetts without actually having to debate on it anymore, whereas they tied into the Consumer Price Index, a.k.a. known as inflation. So basically every time inflation goes up, the gas tax goes up. Well, we all know that when the gasoline prices go up, inflation goes up. So it becomes a self-feeding monster. These people, this is, and I've mentioned this before, and I've said it to you, this is pure evil. This is a mental illness, isn't it?
It is, as you had mentioned, it's the oldest backward thinking that people have to be controlled. It's the Greeks, it's the Romans. You know, the Greeks bolted people into slave ships. They bolted them in there. They couldn't even defecate, and they were there for propulsion. You're just going to row until you're dead. And then when you're dead, I'm going to kick you off and put another dude and bolt you into place. And that was it wasn't criminals that were doing it. It was just people in society. So we need propulsion. And for the greater good, you're going to die for us.
That's
and that thinking, that is the way they think. And they really believe that they have a higher moral purpose.
It still permeates today. Rockefeller gave a speech a little while ago about population control, about how it's going to, our so-called explosion in population, possibly about 8 to 9 billion people by 2020. How it's going to just incredibly, it's going to destroy our environment and destroy our planet. They do. They keep this narrative. It's the 21st century, though, Colonel. You would think that people would be more enlightened about the actuaries, the actual truth that is going on out there, that this is complete bunk. But yet we do, and it brings me back to what I said about the shooting war. We're going to also be shooting at a bunch of people who are firmly convinced about this. They're convinced that this is right, and we got to do this for the greater good. And what they don't realize is their own history is that, once they're all done rounding up you and me, they're going to turn around and they're going to start rounding them up too. It's like, wait a minute, I fought on your side. Yes, but you said this on Tuesday, and it turns out that you wrote a letter to your uncle last week, and you were saying anti-communist things. So, because you know the history of communism, you've studied it. Once the Iron Curtain fell and they took over Eastern Europe, all the so-called people who helped fight in the Russian army and destroy Germany and take over the Eastern Europe, eventually they found themselves in an interrogation room, and these people believed in communism. They marched in the parades. They were part of the system. They were part of the change. And yet, a year or so after the takeover, 1946, 1947, they found themselves sitting in a room. Colonel.
Exactly. And people don't understand because they haven't lived under communism or they haven't talked to people in Poland or talked to people in East Germany or talked to people in Czechoslovakia and look at what happened to those people. Those people, their societies were put on freeze for 60 years. Creativity, curiosity, innovation, and determination were destroyed. In East Germany, when the wall fell, when West Germany tried to reunite, it was very painful because the West would say, okay, we're going to make a contract with your automotive manufacturer. We need you to make these many axles, and here's your payment. Well, they come back in 4 months and go, where are my axles? And they go, what? You actually mean you want us to produce them? I mean, it was like a foreign concept. It took them back almost into the Stone Age. And when you control people, that's what happens. And I think starting to get a taste that they're being kind of used a little bit, because now they're being told what to put in their movies. I mean, you better push Obamacare in your movies. And you don't want to take creative people and tell them how to be creative. So if you do that, you're going to lose them. So, I'm very excited that Valerie Jarrett is going out and telling Hollywood, you need to put these things in your movies. And Hollywood's going, get out of here. Because now they're starting to realize, look, when the curtain falls over us, it will be on us, too. You're exactly right, for sure. They think that they're only going to control us conservatives. They are so wrong when they realize someone's going to come into their liberal house and go, you may only have two children.
It's called the Cloward-Piven model. You overwhelm the system. I'm sorry, but yeah, I was just thinking out loud. You overwhelm the system. You push this giant, all top-down government control. Eventually, things start to collapse, and then the left. You're right. The left realizes it's like, wait a minute, we're being caught in this flood also.
Yeah, and then they're going to, although some of them will go, yay. I think right now, 30-some% still think Obama's a great guy, and 62% think that he's just lying his teeth off. So, I think there's 38% that actually think that communism control is better and will cheer. I mean, they're giddy in Boston right now. They're just happy as pigs. I mean, they're just thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We could throw away the stupid Constitution and leave the separation of power things is done, and state rights, and the federal government supreme, and we, Bostonians, since I happen to have gone to Harvard or whatever, I'm the one that's going to control. They don't understand. We are all going to be controlled. And you might as well we've already kissed our Bill of Rights goodbye. I mean, when you arrest a reporter, there is no First Amendment. That's not the freedom of the press.
Technically, what I'm doing with this radio show, I've talked to other bloggers, I've talked to other citizen journalists, and I was on Red State Radio a couple of weeks ago with Stephanie Davis, and we didn't really cover this, but we're going to cover it later on. It's going to be a recurring thing going on with the Meat and Potato Show and with Stephanie's show. We're going to appear on each other's shows at least once or twice a month in the months ahead. That technically what we're doing under liberalism and some of the new plans, and Feinstein is behind a lot of this, what we're doing is illegal. I mean, because we're not so-called professional journalists, because we do not have a quote-unquote BA or an MA or whatever from some college saying, yes, ipso de facto, you are now a journalist. You've graduated college. I'm not allowed to do this, according to these people.
Well, I think you're allowed to do it, but they are allowed to come and arrest you because you're not being a journalist. Because you're not being paid and you haven't been under the syndicated news of the Associated Press. You're doing this show, and other people are doing the same thing, and there are shows like yours, Tank and Pony out of California, and San Diego, and other shows that are great people. Every one of you will not be protected if they don't like what you say. So they can, right now, according to Senator Feinstein's rule, bash down your door and arrest you because you said something that they deem as terrorist. Apparently, Reid Reasor says that if you choose to not obey the BLM, you're a domestic terrorist, even though they showed up with fully automatic, illegal weapons. See, I don't understand why the mainstream news, even Fox News, hasn't dialed into the fact, we had our state congressman, Stockman, wrote a letter to the BLM and said, what you're doing is illegal. Here's the section that say you may not use force. Why isn't that splashed all over the news? Even Fox News won't touch it. And part of me realizes, Fox News is also controlled by one of those six guys. It kind of gives you the illusion that there's a choice, that Fox News should be right in full, right there blasting away going, look, you guys are here with fully automatic sniper, military-grade snipers with sniper shooters pointed at vigilantes. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's innocent Americans.
They want us to shoot first. That's what this is all about.
That's my fear, is that further down the line, again, future resistant movements, is that somebody, and I'm going to use the term our side, somebody on our side is going to shoot first, and that's all they're going to need. That's all they're going to need. It's unbelievable. In fact, when you think about the shot heard around the world, the start of the revolution, personally, I think that's, I don't know. I've studied a lot of the revolution. That nobody knows where the shot came from. Nobody even really knows if it was even true. I know what some people have written in their diaries and stuff from the time that a shot rang out. Nobody knew where it came from. It's like the Boston Massacre. Nobody knew who fired first or who tempted them first. But that's history. We look at it through the rose-colored glasses of history, right? But if we were back at that time, I'm sure that was a narrative. Oh, they shot first, therefore we're under our legal rights to go in and invade and take over their cannons and take their powder in Concord and Lexington. We have every right to do that. I'm wondering if the same thing will happen. That something will happen in one of these future resistant movements. Somebody will fire, whether it be them or us, and that's all they're going to need. That's all they're going to need. They're going to say, oh, look what happened at such and such ranch last week. Shots rang out. This side opened up fire. Now, see, we've got to roll in and do something.
Well, it's like that march that's coming up on May 16th on BC, the Patriot March.
Yeah.
I was contacted by the president of that to go down to run security for that, and I said, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I would probably show up armed when there's an opportunity to actually take back something for real. But if you're going to have me there running security, you understand that all that is to try and keep our side calm, so that our side doesn't do anything. So if you're running security, kind of put in a place between the feds who are going to show up armed and a bunch of angry patriots, and more than likely what I'm fearful of is the clown in there that decides I'm going to go pack anyway, even though this is a peaceful, non-military, non-armed march. Some guy is going to show up packing on May 16th and might just take a pot shot or throw a firecracker or take a sound that sounds like it, and then the feds are going to go, you fired first, and then gun some guys down. It's not the first time that the federal government has gunned people down in D.C. If you go back to the folks that were the bonus babies after World War II that came back and sat on the lawn. That was actually World War I. World War I, the bonus babies.
Right, because of their veterans benefits, right.
Right. They never were paid them, so they went and sat and they were shocked. And people who were doing it were, Patton was doing it, and, he was a colonel at the time, and he went down and actually, took some violence to people. And so it's not the first time the federal government was actually going to use force to people in the mall and jam people around. So I'm fearful. I'm fearful for exactly what you're saying. No matter who does shoot first, the media will say it was us.
Of course they will.
And it was a white, male, Christian conservative, Tea Party guy like myself or you. Even though we might not even be there. There's Christopher Reid open fire first. I was down in Texas visiting Reid Reasor. The narrative will be manipulated.
Yes, it will. It will. Manipulate the action. That's the title of one of my new playlists I'm putting together on the YouTube page. Yeah, manipulate the action. Colonel, how's it feel now? I mean, you're out of the race. How's it feel? I mean, do you miss being in the race? Do you miss the action going on there? And what are you doing right now? I know you said you're going for your master's or something. Talk about what's going on post-election for you.
Well, I'm finishing up my doctorate in neuropsychology, but I'm working with Dean Wright here in Austin. He's the Tea Party director, and he's also the regional director of several Tea Parties across Texas. So he's asked me to work with him on Region 6 and kind of be the director of the local Tea Party and draft legislation for Texas. Some of the things we're going to try and accomplish is higher education reform. Amazingly, Harvard, if you can believe it, did it voluntarily. Yale did it voluntarily, where they said, here's your student bill of rights. You may not persecute me from my religious or political beliefs. Amazing that that's not the law. So you can right now go in and go, I'm a white, no Christian, or you guys can go back on your paper just, because you're who you are. I don't like the way you wrote this, which happens all the time. People don't admit it. It happens all the time. And the second one is professors can present whatever wacky theory they want, but they have to teach the academic database. So they can come out and say, hey, we're all born genderless beings, and you can be 2/3 male and 1/3 this and 1/3 transvestite. However, most of the research says you're born solidly gendered, male and female. And actually, the male and female brains are vastly different in construction. That's what Harvard Medical says. That's what Cal State Irvine said. So what we're saying is you can't lie. You can present whatever theory you want, which is good. I mean, we should be open to theory. That's what the university, and it's a universal instruction. So we're trying to stop the propaganda. That's the first one. The second thing we're going to be working on is people are being taxed out of their homes in the cities, and it's happening in Boston. It's happening here in Austin. As the property rates go up, the property values also go up, and people on fixed incomes are being taxed out of their homes, and that causes gentrification, and people of lower income or fixed income are all moving into one area of the city and the lower areas, and once you combine that stress together, that's where most of the crime starts.
Sure. That's exactly.
So we're trying to get it so that as your tax, kind of what you have there is the graduated tax rate of your gas. What we're saying is the tax rate will decrease as your value of your home increases, so that you have bills for the rest of your life. So we're trying to do that, but Austin has got liberal control, and it's tough. It's tough to get in there, but I've had a couple of people ask me if I would think about running for Congress, and just going to keep my head to the wheel and do the best way I can to serve the people, protect the Constitution, and keep getting the word out on shows like yours to keep them as busy as I can.
Sure. Excellent. Colonel, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. Send me in an email some of the information that you just said just 5 seconds ago. Give me some links and stuff. Everything, of course, will be shared and posted so that other people can read it, get hold of you, that kind of thing. And, yeah, good luck. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I know you're a busy guy, and, yeah, enjoy your day, sir. Thank you so much for being on the Meat and Potato Show, sir.
Christopher, it's always great to talk to a patriot fight for our country. I appreciate your work, sir. You take care.
Thank you, and you have a good day. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Reid Reasor from Texas. Colonel, I will talk to you on the flip side, sir.
Yes, sir. Good day.
There we go. There we go. Another wonderful talk with the Colonel. I love talking to this guy. Ran for Senate against John Cornyn. Got edged out in all the primaries and the delegation process. It seems to be there's another paradigm that seems to be going on. We're seeing it here in Massachusetts too. When we look at the Baker-Fisher conundrum that's going on, and yeah, it seems the GOP is just hell-bent on getting more like-minded individuals instead of actually trying to shake up the system like they did with Ronald Reagan and like they did with Newt Gingrich. And I know there's some people that have differing views on those two individuals, but I've read all of their books, and they definitely shook up the system. And we'll be talking with the Colonel more as time goes on. Christopher Mader, The Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock.